Hello, you're watching World News Tonight. I'm Adam Yasser. European leaders are seeking to hammer out details of security guarantees for Ukraine after their summit with President Donald Trump in Washington. The question that still looms large: is Russia ready to make peace? The White House has just announced that Vladimir Putin has agreed to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. More on this in just a minute, but here are the other stories. Ukraine is on edge after Trump abandoned his call for a ceasefire during his Alaska summit with Vladimir Putin. Bosnia's top court removed Serb leader Milorad Dodik from power, triggering early elections. Polish police have broken up gangs smuggling tons of drugs across Europe. European and other allies of Ukraine held a virtual conference to sum up this week's summitry, which saw Donald Trump roll out a red carpet for Vladimir Putin in Alaska. This was followed by meetings with President Zelenskyy and some European leaders on Monday. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
The Coalition of the Willing held another virtual summit on Tuesday. Kyiv's partners are discussing what should be the security guarantees for Ukraine, and while they agree on having Ukraine's back,
we all confirmed the need for continued support for Ukraine in the war with Russia.
The details are still being worked out. While few of them came out of the Alaska meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, there has been a clear shift in the approach of the US administration.
Trump went into the meeting saying one thing, insisting that there had to be a ceasefire, insisting that there would be consequences for Russia if Russia did not agree a ceasefire. But he came out of the meeting with a very different view, one which really echoed all of Putin's talking points about the need to go straight to a peace deal.
As European leaders traveled with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Washington on Monday, they described the meeting with the US President as very good and constructive, even though their approach to the war hasn't changed.
The credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today, are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on.
Poland was not present at Monday's summit in Washington, a fact which sparked a domestic discussion on who should have been there, the president or the prime minister. Unexpectedly, much of the attention at the summit turned to the president of Finland, Alexander Stubb.
Some of the international media might wonder, why is the president of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia.
The next step is meant to be a bilateral summit between the Ukrainian and Russian presidents. According to the German Chancellor, this could happen within the next 2 weeks.
The meeting is to take place at a location that has yet to be agreed upon. President Trump has agreed to invite to another three-way meeting afterwards, so that negotiations can now begin in earnest.
The Kremlin is yet to officially confirm that such a meeting is under preparation. But if Putin doesn't play ball, President Trump is once again threatening to go with the stick rather than the carrot.
Putin is going to be good. If he's not, it's going to be a rough situation.
One of the biggest questions remaining now is what would be the US's level of involvement in the potential security guarantees.
It is important that the United States of America gives a clear signal that it will be among the countries that will assist, coordinate, and also participate in security guarantees for Ukraine. I believe that this is a big step forward.
But the Kremlin continues to reject the idea of NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine as a peacekeeping force.
We reaffirm our repeatedly stated position on our categorical rejection of any scenarios that envisage the appearance in Ukraine of a military contingent with the participation of NATO countries.
And President Trump has also denied that the US troops would be involved. After all these talks, it is still unclear what these security guarantees are meant to be. Instead, there are plenty of vague messages.
There'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good.
But how and when remains to be seen. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Wysiak.
The White House has just announced that Vladimir Putin has agreed to hold talks with Zelensky. We're now switching to Alex Kadier, our correspondent in Kiev. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening, Adam.
So, what is Ukraine making of all of this, the summitry and this latest news about Putin allegedly agreeing to hold a summit with Zelensky?
Well, Adam, certainly a degree of skepticism in Ukraine when it comes to a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky, particularly because President Putin has spent the last 3.5 years not acknowledging the legitimacy of the Ukrainian leadership, the Ukrainian government. But as you said, that news breaking just in the last few minutes from the White House, making it very clear that this meeting will happen between President Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Let's go straight to the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Levitt.
Following the encouraging conversations yesterday, President Trump spoke with President Putin by phone, and he agreed to begin the next phase of the peace process, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky, which would be followed, if necessary, by a trilateral meeting between President Putin, President Zelensky, and President Trump. As the president said, Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, and Special Envoy Witkoff will continue to coordinate with Russia and Ukraine to make this happen as soon as possible.
So, Adam, that is all the information we have on this meeting for now. Vladimir Putin, according to the White House, has agreed to the meeting. No clear idea of exactly when that might happen, but as you just heard in Kazimierz Stryszak's report, the German Chancellor said it would happen within 2 weeks. We heard from the Russian side, from Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, just a few hours ago. He said that any level of top official meeting between Ukraine and Russia would require the utmost care in preparation, perhaps playing for time rather than just accepting a meeting outright. The other question, of course, is where might this happen? Well, we know from reports that Vladimir Putin suggested that it could happen in Moscow, that he would host Volodymyr Zelensky in Moscow. Perhaps no surprises, the Ukrainian leader rejecting that proposal outright. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, saying that perhaps Geneva could be a venue. Switzerland, of course, with its neutrality, has played host to many high-level diplomatic events in the past. The Swiss foreign minister earlier today confirming that if Vladimir Putin traveled to Switzerland, he would not be arrested on that outstanding International Criminal Court warrant. But for now, a lot of questions remaining on exactly how and when this meeting can happen, that confirmation from the White House. But as I said just at the beginning, Adam, still some skepticism here in Ukraine that it can even happen. Many believe Vladimir Putin will simply not come to the table, but that may put him in hot water with the White House. Back to you.
Thank you, Alex. This was Alex Kadier from Kiev. A key objective for European leaders during Monday's summit with Donald Trump was to prevent another confrontation between the US President and Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. In this, they succeeded, with the Ukrainian leader playing his cards wisely. Randy Potts has more on this.
When Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a delegation of some of Europe's most prominent leaders gathered in Washington, D.C. on Monday, few substantial agreements were made public. Instead, soft diplomacy was the order of the day. It started with a letter Melania Trump asked her husband, U.S. President Donald Trump, to deliver to Russian President Vladimir Putin during their weekend meeting.
In today's world, some children are forced to carry a quiet laughter, untouched by the darkness around them, a silent defiance against the forces that can potentially claim their future. Mr. Putin, you can single-handedly restore their melodic laughter.
Humanitarian aid to Ukraine.
While the letter didn't specifically mention Ukraine, it is well known Russia has kidnapped almost 20,000 Ukrainian children since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in 2022.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you, and using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States.
Zelensky and Trump had famously quarreled in their last White House meeting, partly over Zelensky not wearing a suit.
And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. Oh, that's good.
But this time, things were different when Zelensky, who has worn black military garb since the invasion of his country, instead wore a suit to the White House.
But this is the best I have. It's good. You look great.
Zelensky's new suit and his gift of new golf clubs to the American president seemed to have changed the tone and made future negotiations look less rocky.
President Zelenskyy and President Trump seems to have gone on a far more positive note, friendlier, some jokes exchanged.
And we are very happy with President that
Trump was far less confrontational, not just with Zelenskyy, but with other European leaders as well. After the meeting, Trump even had nice things to say about French President Emmanuel Macron.
President Macron of France has been with me from the beginning. I liked him from day one and I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual.
You look good. I said the same thing.
In what was a very important meeting to discuss the future of Ukraine and Europe, signed agreements and substantial progress were few and far between. But the mood of the man at the center of it all? For TVP World, this is Randy Potts.
Bosnia's top court has removed President Milorad Dodik from office in Republika Srpska, part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Early elections must now be called. Piotr Miszczel has the details.
A top court in Bosnia and Herzegovina has finally banned the separatist leader of its Serb entity, Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, from power. Dodik has long been shaking the foundations of the Dayton Agreement that put an end to the Bosnian War, a conflict that killed some 100,000 people in the 1990s. Dodik protested his removal as unconstitutional.
It is not aligned with the constitution of Republika Srpska and therefore it cannot have legal effect on the elected president of Republika Srpska.
Following the court's decision, Dodik announced a referendum on his function for late September, but according to experts, it's unclear how he would pull that off in his current predicament. A violent escalation is rather unlikely, given the presence of European Union peacekeepers and the International High Representative with executive powers.
If people in Republika Srpska are inclined to act in defiance of the constitutional order of Bosnia-Herzegovina and help Dodik stay in power, they will face the prospect of being removed from their office. And I think people will think twice before they risk this.
Stripping Dodik of his high position is part of his 6-year ban on holding public office. However, he has pledged to come back stronger.
In 6 years, when I return to elections, I will present another platform if we decide to go in that direction. But until then, I hope there will no longer be a Bosnia and Herzegovina, or at the very least, no more court or persecution.
This time around, Dodik can't hope for help from his ally Aleksandar Vučić, who serves as the president of Bosnia's neighbor Serbia, as he has to deal with nationwide protests and a huge political crisis in his own country. Both Dodik and Vučić tried to garner US support, but according to experts, Trump is unlikely to lend them a hand.
So far, the Trump administration has shown them its cold shoulder. And I think at the moment, they have bigger fish to fry.
But it appears unlikely that the removal of Dodik from his office will soothe domestic tensions. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
Polish authorities have dismantled a major international drug trafficking network, seizing over 800 kilograms of controlled substances worth millions of euros on the black market.
The investigation was led by Poland's Central Investigation Bureau of Police, which collaborated closely with law enforcement across Europe, including authorities in Spain, Germany, Ireland, France, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and Italy.
During the investigation, we secured over 800 kilograms of various controlled substances with a potential black market value of over 235 million euros.
The Bureau also released some details about the suspects detained in the case.
Some of the detainees are associated with Silesian football hooligan groups.
But the core group consisted of Poles living in Spain, who organized shipments of drugs to other European countries. Dismantling a large criminal organization is a time-consuming task, but Polish authorities have already begun pressing charges.
Over 170 people have already been charged in connection with the case. We also secured over 11 million euros worth of property.
Although the investigation is still ongoing, the first convictions have already been handed down, with sentences exceeding 10 years of imprisonment.
Polish tennis superstar Iga Świątek has won the Cincinnati Open, a major tournament that sets the stage for her upcoming US Open campaign. Świątek claimed her first Cincinnati title by beating Jasmine Paolini of Italy 7-5, 6-4. The six-time Grand Slam winner did not drop a set on her way to victory, sending a powerful message ahead of the US Open. The win ensures the Wimbledon champion will climb back to world number 2 behind Belarusian Aryna Sabalenka. The US Open begins on Sunday. August 19th is World Humanitarian Day, with millions of people suffering deprivation, hunger and cruelty of war. Worldwide, the challenges of delivering aid remain severe. Anastasia Yanchenko has more.
This day recognizes and honors humanitarian workers worldwide who dedicate their lives to helping people affected by conflicts, disasters, and displacement.
It's a very sad day because we still realize how many needs, how many people in need we have to address, and we know that we are not going to get to everybody.
The numbers are alarming and continue to rise. The Uppsala Conflict Data Program reports 61 armed conflicts worldwide, while the latest UN statistics show that 305 million people now need urgent aid, the highest data recorded since 1946. In Europe alone, besides the full-scale war in Ukraine lasting more than 3.5 years, natural crises like floods and wildfires have also brought tragedy and left hundreds of thousands without homes.
One of the most significant areas that we have helped is the area of shelter. So talks that we had with people who received a new house or the renovated house, new roof, new windows. These were very touching moments, very touching stories.
Yet Africa remains one of the most vulnerable regions and is a primary destination for volunteers, where all kinds of help are needed, from food and water to basic education.
We are supporting those countries in different contexts, so fire services, emergency medicine, we are supporting education, we are supporting nutritional centers.
While helping people in crisis, many humanitarian workers face extreme dangers. By mid-August, 256 had been killed, 115 wounded, 56 kidnapped, and 31 detained or arrested.
We work in a very difficult circumstances. It's challenging from the psychological point of view for people who work with traumatized people, for example.
Today, it is important not only to remember the people in need, but also those humanitarian workers who gave their lives to save others. This report for TVP World, Anastasia Yanchenko.
On the face of it, the Alaska summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin had only one concrete result. Instead of seeking a ceasefire as a prelude to peace, the US president agreed to Putin's idea of peace based on Ukrainian concessions and vaguely described security guarantees. I'm joined now by Diane Francis, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, to discuss the latest events. Diane, welcome and thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
We just heard from the White House that Putin agreed to meet with Zelensky to discuss peace. How significant is this development in your opinion?
Well, I'm pretty shocked by it, considering that after the summit in Alaska between Putin and Trump and the summit with European leaders between Trump, Zelensky, Putin's response was to bomb the heck out of Ukraine again. And a spokesman also immediately responded that the discussion with European leaders about a security force that would go with boots on the ground to help protect and provide guarantees of security for Ukraine was absolutely out of the question. It was a complete rebuke of all the hard work that Trump and others have done. And I think just underscores the fact that, there's only one way to deal with Mr. Putin, and that is to fight force with force. Now, I would guess that he didn't say to himself, gee, I've gone too far, because Trump is volatile. I mean, bombing right after the summit is just unbelievably awful. And perhaps he is a little concerned. And so now he's kicking the can further down the road and delaying it by talking about a trilateral with Zelensky and Putin and Trump. I don't put a lot of stock in it, and I would hope that Mr. Trump finally realizes he's really being played, and so is the world, and takes much stronger measures.
Right, but supporters of Trump are saying that, he's making progress because he's entangling Putin in these discussions, and he's making it more and more difficult for Putin to jeopardize his efforts. So he's offering some carrots, then he's also threatening sticks. Yes, we may agree that these sticks do not carry a lot of weight, but at the end of the day, as you yourself said, it may be harder for Putin to wriggle out this time.
Well, I would say, sure, you can have a meeting, Vladimir, but I want it tomorrow on the phone, and I want it public, and I want Mr. Zelenskyy involved. And we're going to talk about substantive issues, and you have to promise me, you have to back off what you've said so far about land swaps, or the deal's off. I mean, he's got to start to toughen up his approach instead of saying, okay, well, maybe this time it'll work. It will not work. Vladimir Putin wants to continue the war, and he will until he's absolutely prevented from doing so.
But Putin also wants to do business with America. He wants to end Russia's isolation. So, no, you disagree with that?
Well, he may want to do that, but who's going to deal with that regime and those awful people that support him, like the oligarchs? Look, the point is, and Trump said it very bluntly, this he did say. He said he wants to do business with us, not as long as there's a war going on. That's just never going to happen. So, you can't put the cart before the horse. Stop the war and stop playing games. Stop it. Stop the fighting. And then get to a table perhaps and negotiate. But he doesn't want to negotiate because he's making inches on the battlefield as this saga continues to unfold. I mean, all you have to know about his intention is that after the summit and the talk about a trilateral, he bombed the heck out of Ukraine. He bombed the heck out of it. So, right. I mean, I think the diplomatic dance is important. And I would say that what Trump would be well advised to say is, yes, okay, all right, we'll try it again. It didn't work the last time you bombed, and you made me really angry. So stop doing that. And the other thing is, we're going to do it tomorrow. We're not going to drag this out.
So you don't believe that in Alaska, because we don't know that much about what really happened in terms of the leaders' conversation. No. But can you imagine a situation that, after all, there was some kind of a grand bargain there, at least contours of a grand bargain, where Russia would be able to return, for example, to doing business in the Arctic together with the US, provided the Ukraine conflict is settled?
Well, I think it's okay to make those promises. It doesn't mean you have to keep them any more than Putin thinks he has to keep his promises. So I would string him along, too. I think Trump should play him and continue to say, okay, well, maybe it's possible, but first you've got to clean up your act and you've got to do this, this, and that, or nothing's happening. What I find very odd is that for a deal maker like Trump, it's interesting that he has been prevented from pulling out some of the pressure points, such as terrible sanctions against the war machine and against Putin's oil customers. He's not done that when he can do that.
Well, he did that to India, didn't he?
Well, the Russians have said preemptively, you do that, and, we won't stop the war. So it's a catch-22. You do it, he doesn't stop the war. You don't do it, he doesn't stop the war. I mean, at some point, a line has to be drawn in the sand by Mr. Trump.
Right, but don't you think that, for example, these levies on India, traditional U.S. ally, Trump has good personal relations with Prime Minister Modi, and suddenly, out of the blue, these tariffs on India for importing Russian oil, isn't that a signal that Putin understood?
That's a signal he understood, but he didn't put the sanctions on Turkey or Hungary or China. He was very select, or South Africa. I mean, he was very selective. He picked on India because they happened to be in tariff talks about other things. So why pick on India? I mean, look, India shouldn't be buying oil from Russia. Nobody should be. So the tariff ban should be across the board, everybody, and shut down the war machine. That's the only way to do it, not just to pick on one country. And so, I don't disagree with putting tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, but he's got to do that on all the other countries that buy Russian oil.
And what do you
he didn't.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of the European reactions to the summit? They seem to be cautiously optimistic. Is it just a facade and underneath there's widespread skepticism, or do they see an opportunity there?
I think the Europeans have been very laudable. I was really shocked and gobsmacked, to use a British expression, by the turnout of leaders to Washington on a moment's notice, by their collaboration, by their joint reaction and support for Ukraine, by their praise of Trump for trying to do what he's trying to do. I think it was pitch perfect. Everything they've done is really laudable and very terrific, and it's going to prove to be helpful in the long run. They are also talking about putting boots on the ground, which, Putin's spokesman immediately smacked down hours later, saying, don't you even think you can put somebody from NATO on the ground? We'll target them. And we know that's what would happen. So, they're still playing this game, this dangerous chess game, but the Europeans are on side, and that's really important.
And Trump seems to be going along with the Europeans much more than at the beginning of his presidency, where he basically wanted to discard the Europeans. Now he's even talking about supporting this peacekeeping force, eventual peacekeeping force, with some kind of air support. Isn't that progress in terms of, U.S. involvement in bringing peace to Ukraine?
Absolutely. I think the alliance is getting stronger and stronger as a result of what Trump's journey has been, the Alaska summit, then the Washington summits, and next, hopefully, a trilateral summit. And they're moving step by step with Trump, and they're very united, as opposed to the way things were before about who was paying what to Ukraine for what amount of money. Trump has gotten Europe to agree, and your audience may disagree with me, but I have always felt that Trump is right on one thing, and that is the NATO members were not being fair and pulling their weight. Poland accepted, but they are now. And that's long overdue, and and that's very good news. I think it's also important that Britain and France have been very stalwart in pushing for help and talking about putting boots on the ground, although I think that's very dangerous. And the big news that I'm happy about is Germany is writing the checks because they can afford to, and they were part of this problem in the beginning by buying all the oil and gas from Russia.
So can we imagine a situation where this force on the ground in the end is not a NATO force, but troops under some other, perhaps UN jurisdiction or some other jurisdiction, but actually coming from NATO countries? Is this a possible compromise that can be forced on Moscow?
I think it's a great idea, but Moscow's already said, don't even think about it. Don't think about it. One person from a NATO country that is a soldier helping secure and guarantee the security of Ukrainian will be targeted and shot. And that's what they will do. They will target these people. So you can't have that either. No, Putin has made it very clear. Don't even think about it. Now, that's not to say that a completely voluntary force or a peacekeeping force, but he's got the veto. He's got a veto at the Security Council, which he shouldn't have. He should be booted out of the United Nations. Only the United Nations can order a peacekeeping contingent in an area that needs it, and they will veto it. So will China.
So at the end of the day, will the Americans be forced to send some token force as part of this peacekeeping mission to make it credible and prevent Russian attacks?
I don't think anybody from a NATO country should send anybody as a security guarantee force, because Russia will target them, and I think that would be wrong to put people in harm's way like that. On the other hand, they've got to give money. They've got to give as much money, and they've got to provide as many weapons to Ukraine as they can to bombard the heck out of Russia, and they're willing to do that. and they
Diane,
don't have
we
much
have to-
choice.
we have to finish.
Americans will do what they
have-
can, but they will not do anything on their own.
Diane, thank you very much. Our time is up. Thank you very much. Diane Francis, Atlantic Council.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for watching World News Tonight. I'm Adam Yasser. Good night.